What is going on, beautiful human beings? Welcome back to the Ryan Magic Show. Today I'm here with a special guest. I'm going to say a new friend. We're building our friendship and connection. Miroslav Petrovic, who is someone that I consider to be a very unique human being, but somehow similar to myself in many ways. So I'm really looking forward to dropping in on this conversation. But Miroslav's background is very, very, I'm going to say traumatic upbringing, in which he had to find a way to get over some very intense personal challenges, coming to Australia at a young age, learning to overcome a stutter and find his voice and himself, his authenticity in the world. He helps embodied entrepreneurs find their voice more with speaking and sales training. He does a lot of his own speaking and around the world as well. But more so than that, I feel that his inquisitive soul has allowed for the integration of wisdom to come from so many different angles in this personal growth journey. He's got a lot of experience with Tantra, a lot of experience with meditation, a lot of experience with trauma work and embodiment and emotional, somatic work, and then the spiritual development, spiritual wisdom, and then practically putting himself out there, building different ventures, and then a bunch of stuff around relationships and health as well. So you're a pretty unique person, man, and it's an honor to have you on. So thanks for coming, brother.
Thank you, bro. It's good to be here.
Awesome, man. So
I'm curious where you're going to take us from here.
Yeah, same. Same here. I'd love for you to kick off just by giving a little bit more context to the audience. And I'm going to challenge you to summarize your entire life journey in 5 paragraphs, 5 sentences. So a couple of minutes to go into that.
Yeah, okay. I guess, like, do I give you the highlights reel and make it like a Christopher Nolan documentary, or do you want the timeline sequence?
I reckon
really
timeline
brief timeline sequence. Yeah, it's going to make more sense.
Yeah, if there's 5 key chapters.
So that first chapter is probably like coming to Australia. So I was born in Bosnia, former Yugoslavia. When the war broke out, we were refugees in Serbia first, and then from Serbia we made our way over here. So came here not speaking the language, not really ever anticipating my parents that they were ever going to move. So lots of challenges. Some of that stuff I'm still unpacking. Like the other day I started singing this Yugoslavian song and I started bawling my eyes out, and the emotion was like the grief of the breakup of Yugoslavia. And it's like I was 5. I had no concept what Yugoslavia was. But on some level, you know, that conditioning and the relationship to that place that I called home had already set in, even though it wasn't fully cognitive. So I had a lot of introversion, you could say. Like I don't even relate to this stuff as trauma, but you could diagnose it as such. Used to stutter a lot. People just assumed I was mute a lot of the time because I wouldn't speak. Around friends and family, I was fine and normal, but anything outside of that, I was pretty like pulled into myself. And the first chapter of change there was meditation, which I discovered just after high school. And when I started meditating, I was like, Jesus Christ, why didn't anyone tell me about this beforehand? Like what I started feeling inside, I was like, this is amazing. I feel so connected to myself and to life. And it was in there where I was like, hang on, the last 20 odd years of my life, I've been very disconnected from whatever this is. And that had been normal. So this sense of calling it anything was just like absurd. And from discovering meditation, I kept asking this question, this is great, but how do I go to having this level of connection when I'm not sitting in meditation? You know, eyes closed, legs crossed. You're kind of isolated from the world, even though you're very connected. And what came both internally and externally, like people started saying this to me, is you need to start teaching and you need to start speaking about this. And I was like, I don't want to do that. And it also got very loud that was exactly the path I needed to take. And I would
Why
say
didn't you want to do that?
Well, it was scary. It was probably the scariest thing you can imagine when, you know, you're shy and stuttering. And it's like, I'll go being terrified to speak to a new person, let alone to a group of people. And then when I did start speaking, I was like, this is just an open-eyed meditation. The difference is there's a lot of sensation moving through my body, but getting into that present state where I'm meeting life was happening in a much shorter time span when I would start getting on stages compared to when, I'd need to descend through the layers of myself to meet a more meditative place inside me. So that basically led to all the speaking, teaching, facilitating. And then eventually people were like, Miroslav, what you're doing on stage is very different. Can you teach me? And up until then, it was kind of like my little secret. And then when people started asking me, it was just like goosebumps through my whole body. And I was like, oh, this stuff I've learned and the way I've learned to connect with an audience on stage, it's not really for me. Yes, it's for me, but it's more importantly, it's for other people to learn how to connect with groups on a much wider scale so they can share their message and whatever they're here for. So how are we doing? Is that 4 or 5 paragraphs?
I don't even know, but that was beautiful. Thanks for framing that out. Love that.
I mean, let me add one more paragraph. What I'd say is, like, to future pace it, I think we get lost in the details of all of this stuff. And for me, the central theme since I started meditating has always been like waking up to the fullness of my own nature. And the business, the speaking, the coaching, the training, all of that stuff that's happened along that journey, it's kind of like it's still the same journey. I'm still just meditating. The way it's showing up externally and what that internal piece asks me to do, if you will. Intuition is a bit overused. It's like we can pretend a lot of things are intuition, but when it's like quiet silence, where I'm directed to go is continually to keep meeting those edges through life. Yeah, that's a nice summary.
So when you're saying that you started off with meditation, that was a huge, like the veil got pulled out and you're able to see and like, whoa, why wasn't I given this earlier? But then when you started speaking, you're saying you're able to reach that point of unity or transcendence quicker.
You could say that. I would probably add that there's different flavors of it, but very quickly, it was like my mind would go quiet when I would get on stage. And I remember those first few speaking gigs, it was like watching words come out of my mouth. I was like, whoa, this is just a moving meditation. Like the way yoga is a moving meditation, speaking on stage can be a moving meditation. And also, like there was earlier iterations of this where that didn't happen. Like having to do oral presentations in high school, it was terrifying.
Yeah, I'm just smiling because I can relate to the story a lot. And just finding more overlaps in our stories. So, because when I was in high school, I hated speaking, and it ended up becoming my biggest passion. But you couldn't have paid me $1 million to pursue that as a career when I was 18, if I had $1 million. But and the other reason I'm laughing is because I have a model that I call the flavors of courage, and they're all connection points back to fulfillment in my perspective. And they start, like, I've got this model that starts in the most intangible with the courage to let go or surrender or transcend. And then it ends in the most tangible with the courage to endure. But I see them as all access points to fulfillment. And then there's the spectrum there. One of the points on the spectrum is expression. And yeah, I'm excited for us to just keep dropping in on this. So I'm curious to know, in your reality, when you are pursuing and going to do a speaking gig, what excites you to do that? What's the actual inspiration in Miroslav's reality to want to challenge your edges and speak?
I think it's generally the aliveness. Like what I'm looking for is, where's the aliveness? And that's partially my internal and external world. Like where is my personal aliveness? But even more so, it's where is this audience at the moment and where are they going? And what's going to allow them to come more fully alive? What can I bring to them that's going to open up their life, their journey, their business, whatever it is?
Yeah, okay. Because I kind of asked a 2-part question there. It wasn't very clear. And your answer was to one of them. And so I'm hearing that when you speak and you started speaking, the thoughts went out of your head and you became present. just like what would happen in meditation. Different flavor, but you become present. And you actually, when you say aliveness, is that a synonym for presence, or is it different?
Oh, it's a good question, isn't it? Yeah. Again, it might be different flavors, but I'd say they're definitely like, on the same spectrum. I think it's hard to be alive without being present. And that feeling of aliveness generally comes with a presence.
Yeah.
I would go with yes. Let's go with yes. Yeah.
Okay, cool. The point of curiosity and the point of admiration for that intention is that I spend a lot of my time coaching people on courage, and most people want courage so that they can use it to get what they're attached to. And so they're actually wanting to use courage to overcome the fears that are blocking them from meeting their attachments, usually always externals, and like success or finding their partner, and they're sick of being single, and why can't they call in their king or their queen? And there's these external attachments. Whereas I find that, and this might lead into meta fear if we talk about that next, but it's rare to find someone that chooses to do things that challenge themselves purely because they're seeking an experience in life. Because I see the purpose of life as being to have the highest quality experience. And I've learned to then surrender my attachments so I can actually prioritize what is going to be required for that highest quality experience. And I'd love to hear does that resonate as something that drives you? It's the experience versus the externals. And was there a shift in your journey with that? Have you wrestled with materialism? Have you wrestled with attachment?
Yeah, of course.
Or have you always been quite experience focused?
No, you're all of the above, more or less. What I would say drives me is a desire for the truth. Like, sure, experience is nice and I like experience, but essentially it comes and goes as well. And there's always a curiosity about new experiences, the novel, because the presence naturally comes on when we're having a novel experience. But I feel like my desire has always been for a deeper intimacy with the truth, which has often involved breaking through my own known and unknown ideas or relationships to life. If I've been telling myself I'm someone that doesn't speak in public, and I suddenly start speaking in public, my self-image has to fall away very quickly. And that's going to bring up all the fear that's been keeping that story stuck in a very convenient shape in the bigger strategy of who I am. And I say strategy because it's like the way I'm pretending to be and the way any of us pretend to be, like the way our identities work are often conditioned. Like this input happens, that's the output. The way we move, the way we talk, it's like if this is the range of possibility, we kind of exist in a small spectrum of that. And whenever these moments of meta-fear come up, for me was like, this is an opportunity for me to step outside of who I know myself to be, where my identity, my sense of self has no map for that data. And generally what happens when we go into a space where there's no mapping is like fear, because the system is more open and orientating to what's happening. So at some stage I discovered that if I didn't put a story on that feeling, on the fear, it was just a sensation. And it wasn't even a bad one. It was kind of like an elated feeling and a lot of energy running through me. And I was like, this is fun. And it's a very obvious doorway that opens for me around where I need to go next. And to the level, like even when I was doing my TED Talk, I remember sitting in the studio, the auditorium, whatever it was, and like 15 minutes before the TED Talk, I was like, I haven't felt any fear. And when I say fear, I relate to this very differently than someone else might pick up if they haven't been familiar with my work. But this concept of meta-fear, I was like, there is no energy running through me, and I'm going to be on the stage in like half an hour. And my internal thought was, do I even need to be here? Like, why did I just fly halfway across the world if my system isn't getting like ignited internally by what I'm about to do? And then it was like the last 15 or 20 minutes, it just started flowing. And I'm like, great. Because essentially what I'm bringing to people when I step onto the stage is the energy that's flowing through me. And if I have to like conjure that and get into some kind of state, for me, it's like maybe I just need to be somewhere else. And when it's naturally there is what I found when I perform at my best and when people get the most from me. I've kind of gone on. I think I've answered what you were asking, but I've also taken it on a bit of a tangent. I don't know. You say some words.
I like it. Yeah, that's pretty much how I feel after I share. Just saying, you say some words. Love that. I love that tangent, man. It's very, very interesting. It's very unique, and it kind of supports the direction I was going with the chat in a way of setting the intention as to why new courageous steps are taken away from to meet the attachments and the familiarities and the externals. And it's that you're actually seeking an experience of newness, which to me feels like, it sounds like the pursuit of awakening. If we're a limited being that has all this karma and shaping of our personality and identities and safety strategies and personality patterns and trauma, and all of those are misperceptions. And the more that we can expose our judgments and charges and see past them, the more we can see the truth, the world through the lens of unconditional love and fullness. But instead of seeking it out in a way of just bathing in the purity of oneness with meditation, you're doing it in a really edgy, unique pursuit. And so what's your perspective on seekers who prioritize the spiritual journey of awakening with some form of spiritual practice and attending satsangs and praying to deities? I'm curious for a non-politically correct answer that speaks to your truthful opinion of what those souls may miss out on in terms of the pursuit.
Yeah,
do you think they miss out on anything?
I think it depends on what kind of time span we look at. I feel there's a season for everything, and there might be a season for just spend months or years in an ashram doing what you need to do, and that might be exactly what you need at a given time. But also, like, what my journey and experience has shown me, it's like I can't dogmatically commit myself to anything. And what's today's medicine? It's like tomorrow, with that internal compass, could turn it like 90 degrees to the thing that I was doing. And it might not make sense to me, and it sure hell doesn't make sense to anyone around me. Like, what comes up for them is probably judgment when, that internal pivot happens. And I mean, yeah, when I think about other people, it's like, I really don't know what journey they're on. And for some of them, it might be useful, like it's exactly where they need to be. And also sometimes I think it's bypassy. It's easier to sit in the meditation cushion than it is to take it into life. And there's people I've spoken to, they've done all the things. They've done the NLP, they've done the plant medicine, they've sat with masters, and they're still not at the place they want to be. And it's like we meet and I'm like, your next spiritual development is sales training. I'm like, you can keep running from life for as long as you want, but you're going to meet the parts you're running from yourself when you start looking at how do you start having sales conversations in an integral, authentic way, because it's going to force you to look at money and power, which sitting on a meditation mat may do and it may not do. But when you start facing it in life, it's like, all right, now I'm dealing with my shadow head on.
And has your experience been that in order to be able to find love, flirting with the danger of the ego, so to speak, is much more difficult?
You could say it's a risky business because you're playing with attachment and desire, and it's like on the meditation cushion, it's all very safe. Like, yeah, stuff can move, but it's still fairly safe. You're in a seated position, usually in a very safe place. Whereas taking this out into the world, there's a lot more variability that we can't control. Like how people are going to respond to our life, to our business. And, it's interesting. You've been through this journey yourself. So it's like it encourages us to start seeing the life experience as a spiritual experience and nothing as wrong or bad. And for me, that journey, I was like, if this is true, and I'm gonna entertain this idea that it's one consciousness that's showing up in and through all of life, then I was like, I don't really get to choose the experience. Like, my role is kind of to open my heart to the experience as much as possible. And if that experience wants to take me to learning sales, even though like I was a spiritual boy that hated sales, it's like my identity, my sense of self is kind of bowing down to the path and being like, okay, if we're going to do this, let's do this. Is that kind of making sense?
Yeah, it is making sense. And I'm hearing that your relationship with following that inner nudge is that whatever direction it goes in the landscape of creation, which is every single thing, even the things that society labels bad, is correct and true and spiritual and perfect. It doesn't have to be in a spiritual setting to be spiritual, and that you trust that. And
I think there's still a value in the other, like having that meditation practice, a thing that's going to connect you to a space beyond your identity, is almost invaluable, because I think it's way too easy to get lost in the external pursuit of spirituality and to forget why we're really doing it. I feel for me, there was probably years where I told myself, I'm doing this and my path now just looks like this external thing. And I was also like, yes, and I can keep digesting my karma and the conditioning and unraveling it all through the external thing, which I think is a big part of this fear, courage, meta-fear conversation we're having. But I was like, I am not having more regular experiences of being connected to the oneness that I am, that we are, through this. Like, it happens in moments, but I'm like, my paradigm has ultimately not shifted in the last 10 years. It's created openings and it's like lots of experiences, but it brought me back to this place of like, I need to come back to a practice with someone that's abiding in this state, so I can keep getting a reference point of what it means to be experiencing life from that place, as opposed to doing life from this place and seeking to be in that place.
I hear you. It makes complete sense to me. So I feel like that's the difficult. If we bathe in stillness and in oneness, and then we get clarity from source of what our next aligned move is, and then that stillness says, okay, cool, well, you've got service to be had in your coaching business. And then the journey then becomes, cool, I've got to grow my coaching business. I feel like for me, I'm going out of the place of stillness that gave me the clarity into the world, which triggers more of my ego, triggers more of my fears. And it's easy to then get stuck in that. But then if having that constant reference point back to spirit allows me to continue to flavor my real world experience with love and with oneness. But I feel like it's very rare that someone, I think it's really rare that someone is wanting to take their spiritual experience and thrust it into the world and actually follow the thread of fear as the compass. That is very unique and rare. And I'm curious about that, because, you know, when we can draw parallels in each other's journeys, there's definitely seasons where I fall into a comfort zone and my mind very sneakily creates a bunch of stories that keep me from doing those courageous things, even though it's my karma and path to continually lean into courage. There's chapters where I completely forget and I get in my comfort zone and my mind convinces me and tricks me to stay where I am to avoid going outside of it, out of the fear of death ultimately. But I'm curious to know from your perspective, because I listened to your TED Talk before this and you spoke about the top 5 regrets of the dying. I'm curious to know if you give yourself a little assessment of those regrets. If you were to pass today, what of those top 5 regrets would you have as the most, would you be closest to having out of the 5?
I don't know all 5 off by heart.
Do you want me to quickly smash them out?
Let's do it.
Yeah. So there's like the top regret is not having the courage to live a life true to yourself instead of living a life that others expect of you. the next regret, I don't know the order, but not spending enough time with friends or keeping in touch with friends. Working too hard is one. Not giving yourself permission to express how you truly feel. And then not giving yourself permission to be happy for where you are.
It's beautiful. I think it's a combination of 1 and 5 for me. And it's kind of funny because I've done so much of 1. And I've pushed, like, if it was a car speed thing, like, I feel like I've pushed 1 to the extremities, and I can still see how much of my life that I haven't lived because of other people's ideas. And it's like, it's continual deconditioning. It's like, oh, at some stage in my journey, I'm like, even the way I'm dressing is being controlled by other people's thoughts and ideas. What if I start changing that? And like the subtle awareness of like unbuttoning a couple of buttons on my shirt, suddenly I'm like, this is kind of edgy for me. So there's this realization that that sense of who I am, and am I allowing the fullness of who I am to be expressed? It just feels like an ongoing journey. And I kind of celebrate people for whom that's not a journey.
Who on earth has not got that as a journey? Seriously, do you actually know people that?
I've heard people say, I know myself completely. Like, I just know who I am. And I'm like, like, thumbs up to you. That's fantastic. And it might be like, maybe that's not something they're traveling in this lifetime. Like, I don't know. But
that also could be bypassing, right?
It could be.
Acceptance of their current level of consciousness. And they're like, you know what? I've got enough self-love or enough fear that I'm not willing to explore my outer perimeter. I'm just going to enjoy what I consider to be myself for this level of consciousness and this amount of self-awareness.
Yeah. And, and that's okay. Sometimes I say, like, even with this relationship we're speaking to, the courage and fear and seeking out those experiences, like sometimes you just want to hit the pause button. Like, do nothing for a day or a few weeks or however long time you need to just be in the experience of your life you're having without having to seek anything. But I also find when the veil does lift, it's like the moment my heart starts pounding, it's not even a choice. It's like, now that I've seen the veil open, I know I need to walk through that initiation. And in regards to your question about, is there anything now? So Vic and I are in the process of organizing our wedding. And you'd be surprised how much stuff comes up around organizing a wedding that you would not consider. Like, this fusion of our personal, professional, and social lives, and having the collective of all of that come to the wedding is like, there is so much stuff that happens on weddings, which is just on autopilot. I'm like, guys, essentially it's a big party and a big commitment, and everything else is up for grabs. But it's actually like, that's a very radical way to look at a wedding. It's like there is all these expectations around what's supposed to happen, how the rituals are supposed to happen, both culturally informed, but then also like legally, religiously informed. And it's just been a big descripting of like, instead of me just going through, well, us, but in this case, I'm only analyzing myself. Instead of me just going through the hoops of, oh, we should book a reception and we should get a 3-course dinner and, we should do this and we should do that. It's like, hang on, does any of that feel like alive to me and how I want to express myself? And when we kind of scrap everything away, it's like, oh, a lot of people might have missed expectations. I'm like, we should put on the wedding invite, this will not be your average wedding, because we don't have a desire to play into a lot of the things that have been normal for us. And not as a sense of rebellion, but it's actually like, this just isn't where our relationship and our wedding is meeting. And can we actually serve that as opposed to just going through whatever people go through, ticking off the boxes.
Dude. Thanks for sharing that. I've definitely thought about this as well. And because I've been to weddings and felt my own relationship to the way that the ceremonies unfolded, I've felt internally just really out of alignment with a lot of the ways in which the weddings unfold, and I've thought, this is what I'm going to have to show up to. I'm not going to look forward to it at all. It's not going to feel like a celebration of me. This feels like it would be an awful experience for me. So I can resonate and honor the courage of that. It sounds like you'll get married before I do, so I'm looking forward to just at least hearing about.
I'll send you an invite.
Yeah, I would love that. And just getting an experience of, okay, cool. just for permission, extra permission. Yeah, it sounds awesome.
So I also wanted to like, when you were asking me the top 5 regrets, I'm like, the regret that's probably the biggest for me, and this is something that's come up continually, it's not about being happy like the last one. It's more about the nuance of fully appreciating what I have right now. And I feel like that's where some of my biggest pain is. It's like sometimes I can feel the way my conditioning is objectifying reality. And there's just a desire to sink in and cry and be fully fucking present with the experience I'm having. And sometimes I'm like, I know that that's possible, and I can't slow myself down enough to appreciate the views and the blade of grass and all the other stuff, or the connection that, you know, I'm having with someone. And it kind of comes in waves, the gratitude. And when it's there, I'm so deeply appreciative of it. And I would say that experience, like that gratitude for life, and I don't even mean like beautiful things, like, you know, pretty views. I even mean like sadness. Like, can I fully fucking be here and grateful for the sadness that's flowing from my body, or the grief? And that, like, top 5 regrets, I'm like, I think that's where I've zeroed in my life, and not trying to be grateful, but just trying to come back to be with life as fully as I possibly can in every moment.
That's beautiful. What I'm hearing is that it's the 5th regret with a more accurate spiritual lens, knowing that happiness is on like a positive pole, and it's not something that can be accurately strived for, but you're interpreting that last one, permission to embrace what is fully. And I can put my hand up and say that it's a real edge. And I really live my life by these 4 tenets. The 4th one is that fulfillment's here and now. And I see the purpose of life being fulfillment. And I see fulfillment being an amalgamation of present moment aligned decisions that I've split into 3 categories that are creating, celebrating, or elevating, giving, receiving, or growing, as like the 3 ways that I categorize access points back to the present, back to my heart. So sometimes I feel like I got to smash it, and it's like there's something to do, some big edge to real difficult conversation, proposing to my partner, starting a business, messaging you, some courageous thing that's more external and more execution based. Sometimes the real courageous step is to have permission to receive, ask for something, or just lay there and just soak up, like snuggling with myself in the moment, or just basking in the sun. Or thirdly, like there's an irrefutably loud block of some kind of way that the universe is calling me into, alchemizing what's present. Some kind of like, I'm struggling to give, struggling to receive, and this is going to have to work with what is. There's an emotion there, some trauma here. There's some kind of way that the universe is calling me to grow. And I see those as equally opportunistic to connect to my heart based on the discernment of what the universe is presenting to me and what's needed to be in fulfillment. And I struggle with that. That's why I created that model, to help me. Because the embodiment of it I find very difficult. Thank you for sharing that vulnerably, man. Do you have any practices that you're doing in your world that you're using to call yourself more into the present, or reference points or anchors back to it? You mentioned it's a big edge. What do you do with that?
So recently, it's been a lot of meditation. And I've got, when I say a lot, sometimes it's 25 minutes, some days it's like 2 hours. But I've really kind of amped up the dial and being like following that as a calling, as opposed to other things I used to fill my time with. And I find the regularity of that practice is making the veil thinner. It's like sometimes I'll just be driving and I'm like, I stopped driving. It's not Miroslav driving the car now. It's like I'm driving inside myself, and I'm experiencing myself as the road and the trees and the car and everything else. And sometimes it's just a split second. I'm like, oh, there it is. Like there's that relationship to the greater self. I don't have, I do have practices that I do spontaneously when I remember to do them. Like there's little tantric practices of, when you're eating, you let yourself become the taste and fully merge. So the experiencer, the experience, and the experiencing become one, which is a little meditation that I tend to do in brief whenever I sit to do a formal practice. But then it's nice to just notice those glimpses come through, like, oh, I'm having chocolate, and I just melted into the experience of having chocolate. Like, it's not me and a having and a chocolate. We just dissolved, and it's just that moment happening. But I find for me what's worked well is really having that platform of having a regular practice. It's like those opportunities open up more spontaneously of their own accord.
Thanks
and
for sharing.
I'll add one more thing here as well. I started working recently with this guy that's been supporting me a lot, and he was like, I think you have a differentiation between the awakened state, which feels good for you, and the non-awakened state, which is like, being in shame or grief or all this other stuff. It's like, you're awake here as well. You're just not recognizing your awakeness in these moments. And he's like, naturally we have a preference for good experiences. But beyond that, what it opened up for me is, like, I had an experience on stage not long ago where a lot of shame came up afterwards. And I'm pretty good at holding it myself. Externally, most people wouldn't have known that there was shame moving through me. But we got in the car, and usually my partner drives if I've been speaking, and I was like, no, I need to drive. And I jumped into drive, and I could feel the part of me, the ingrained part that's like, I need to get home, and I need to, like, sit down and meditate and journal and process this thing. And as we were driving, I pulled over to get petrol, and I'm pulling the hose off the pipe, and it was just this split second of like, there's nowhere to fucking go. There's nowhere to rush. This shame is so perfect. And just watching that other part of me fall away that was trying to get rid of it and judging the shame unconsciously, I was like, oh, this is spacious. Like, I'm just having an experience right now. And this experience is shame, and it doesn't need to change. And after that, the part that wanted to change was still there, but it's kind of like its power had been somewhat removed. It's like now it was up against the fact that, yes, there's a part that wants this to be different, and also it's perfect as it is. And not all of my chips were in the table towards, I need to change this experience. It was just like, oh, the following morning, the experience was still there. And I was like, this is okay. Like, can I stop fighting the need to change it? And can I accept this as a part of life as it is?
So beautiful, man. I feel like this is, in my observation and experience, a chapter of the journey that like the second, because I don't know what's after the second, maybe there's more, but like the second chapter after healing, experiencing, feeling to heal, doing trauma work to solve myself, doing plant medicine to fix, and doing a bunch of things to try to improve what is, and then getting to a certain point, at least in my conscious awareness when I'm aware of it, because I forget about it all the time, where the purpose of the healing work isn't to change myself, but it's to create a new relating experience with the fragility inside that knows that there's going to be nothing but unconditional love present, witnessing the pain that it's usually is what's coming up for me, whether it's fear, anger, grief. And then that part that's experiencing the pain feels unconditional love, because inherent within the healing, inner child work, trauma work, emotional release work, there isn't that inbuilt energy of, I want you to go away. I feel like it's like turning away from the inner child, even though it's turning into a breath work ceremony, a journey, or journaling practice, or, hey, I'm walking into a session with this amazing healer. But while I'm walking into that, I've also, behind me is my inner child that's really wanting to be seen and just loved as he is, without him being any different. But I'm kind of like, I'm really excited to see you heal up, because I want you to get this little guy the fuck out of here. That's what I'm indirectly saying, and what I've been saying for years with my healing journey. And I still do a lot of the time, but the awareness has started to come in of that pattern, which I perceive to be the same thing that you're talking about. So subtle, hey?
It's very subtle. And it's like, until you're there, it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
That's the best way I can say it. And, and even now, like, as I've been moving through meeting this path even more deeply, it's like, oh, so much of the strategy of my identity or the way I've been functioning in the world has been about avoiding meeting this path unconsciously. Like the busyness and, and being an overwhelm. And there was a point where I was like, I need to work through this overwhelm. It keeps happening. And it's like, the overwhelm is just a symptom of me not wanting to be with this part fully. And it's not even conscious. Like, I can feel that there's tears and grief stuck in there that want to pour through, but there's nothing I can do to reach them. It's like, I can just turn towards it and be patient, like be loving, not even try to pull the grief out.
I love this conversation, man. I'm very grateful for all the work, courage, leaning in that you've done in your entire life to get to the point where this message can be put out, because it is like that fifth regret of not giving myself permission to be happy. This idea that life is not about the highs. It's not about the good, the positive, feeling good. It's about learning to find an experience in whatever's true, which is going to be neutral overall, which is what DeMartini says. But I don't know if I put myself in the category of being a representation of the collective. I certainly didn't get behind that concept for a while. It's like, fuck you for saying that there's equal bad and good. Like, just don't want to accept that, because I want to state manage myself into the good. And what would you give to the audience or those that are listening? What message, direct message, can you communicate to anyone that's listening that has an earnest desire to embrace this concept and free themselves from a little bit more of that attachment to the pain, or away from the pain?
I mean, you quoted DeMartini. I don't know where this stands and where it lives in his reality, but if we did use his words, for me, neutral isn't grey noise. It's not numbness. It's not disconnection. It's more like being available for all of it. And it's not really neutral. It's like you're amping up the saturation and the volume and the capacity for all of it. Like, that's really what neutral is, which sounds a bit counterintuitive. That's been my experiences of it anyway. I remember at one point I was working with a somatic therapist, and she goes to me, she said this remark that was just a passing remark. She was like, we keep clearing, and that's just what we do until we get enlightened, and until we clear away all the stuff. And I was like, no, hang on a second. Like, I can trust you with your expertise, but that's a misalignment around my relationship and what I've been taught around the path of enlightenment. It's not the removal of all conditioning and then you're perfectly enlightened. I'm like, it's more like a state shift where instead of running from internally running and neglecting the experiences you're having, you just say yes to all of them. And you can't do that. It's not a logical trick. It's like internally you're just open and available for everything that's happening. And one of my teachers said it well. He goes, it's not everlasting bliss. It's more like gratitude for everything that's happening in life. It's like gratitude even for the painful moments, because you're so deeply appreciative of the fact that you're able to have this experience. And it's not even a you at that stage. It's just an experiencing and an appreciation that's arising spontaneously for the capacity to be experiencing.
Yeah. That's going to be such a good mini snippet highlight that I'm going to get podcast producer Krishna that's listening to this right now in the future to snip it and put on your Instagram or on my Instagram. But the funny thing is, or the question that I have that I still wrestle with, is that does that acceptance or embracing of what is actually make your experience better in the future? Because that's kind of a contradiction.
Well, not necessarily, right?
Why do we do it? We're talking about you having positive and negative experiences, which is neutral in total, but it's accepting it and appreciating it that is the approach we're going for. But even going for that approach isn't going to make the experience better. But we're believing it is on some level. That's why we're doing it.
Well, I don't, like, we kind of have a choice and we kind of don't. That's my experience of it. It's like if you're enjoying the illusion you're in, you can stay there. There's no need to go anywhere else. Or the experience of life. Like, let's not even call it an illusion. I feel like it can be a bit take away from the magic that it is. But I'm just going to slide this in here while we're having this conversation. I feel for me it's important to keep coming back to like, what's my direct experience and what do I know to be true and what have I just heard from other people and I'm assuming is true. And I feel it's really easy to get lost in that world of, people say this is what it is and this is the way, so this must be the way it is, which is very different than being in the experience of like, oh, I get it now. And the way I might color the experience comes out completely differently for me. I don't know. That felt relevant to slide in there.
It's brilliant. Thanks for sliding it in. Seriously, really beautiful. It's kind of like a little bit of a moment where I realized myself, where I can intellectualize
me too.
that little pattern that then robs the beauty of the experience, which is it's a powerful pattern and it's got some beautiful qualities as well. But it's definitely also, thanks for sharing that. It's beautiful.
I really appreciate this conversation with you, Ryan. For me, there's a love in the gentle unpacking of, the way we hide from ourselves. You're going to say something there.
No, I hear that and I feel that. Thank you. And I also want to say that the catch up that we had, our one formal official drop-in catch up, was pretty special as well. Yeah, it's next level. It's like, we just caught up in a cafe and then hands on heart, first time catching up, and then you reflected something that was some deep grief for me, and there was some processing and unpacking, and then some unity. That was a cool experience.
There's a love for me, like a meeting in this way. One of my teachers took these old like tantric precepts and refigured them. So it's like, instead of the guru being at the head of the thing, it was like the community is at the head of the thing. And there was one line in there that used to be like, every time you visit the guru, you come with spiritual intention, you come to meditate, whatever. And he changed it to every time you meet another member of the kula of the community, you do it with the same intention. Like, you do it to sit, to meditate. Like, it's a part of what you do. You don't have to spend all your time doing it. But I was just really appreciating that in this moment, like our shared interest in a deeper desire for truth, for intimacy with life, or whatever we want to call that search. So just appreciating the depth of your draw to that as well.
Thank you, Miroslav. I'd actually love to use this moment to pivot the conversation slightly, or drastically, actually, back to back to some of your superpowers that you forged that will have direct practical utility for those that are listening on the journey of their service. And because we kind of skipped over it, and this is why I do this primarily to meet my own curiosity and need for connection. And then I trust that serving of my own intentions for that part of me pours over into the audience and the listeners. And I feel as though your unique approach to meeting your edges and that pursuit of feeling alive, and that actually being the compass, could be the angle through which people can view their current biggest challenges and allow it to them to progress through them. And so I'd love to hear some direct wisdom pieces that you would give to any of the listeners right now and viewers that have a purpose and they're stuck. They want to move past it. What advice would you give them to change their relationship with fear from your angle?
Start meditating. Not to learn meditation techniques, just to develop the capacity for sitting in stillness and space. And there was a study that was done, and I quote this in my book, I maybe even said this in the TED Talk, with Tibetan monks. And the main difference they found, like when fear starts moving in Tibetan monks compared to normal people, is in Tibetan monks, the sensation happens and there's a big space between those sensations meaning anything. Whereas for the everyday person, it's sensation story, sensation story, sensation story. It's just like a mouse in a merry-go-round or whatever they do. You don't know what I mean. So
I like that visual more though, the merry-go-round with the mice on it versus the
mice having a
wheel.
good time. And, you know, that's kind of it. We are out there, and sometimes we think we're having a good time as well. But the gist of that study for me just showed me what I kind of discovered in first-person experience. It's like as I descended in myself and I was capable of having more presence and more space around my experience, I was like, oh, this is fear. It doesn't mean anything. And when I slowed down, I'm like, it's not even fear. Like, fear is just a fucking concept. It's just a bunch of sensations dancing in my body. And when I'm not judging them, they feel kind of pleasurable. Now, saying that to someone it's just like I'm pointing you at what's possible until you start sitting down and doing the practice yourself. A lot of the time when I teach people speaking, like speaking is a great place to meet fear because 8% of people have it the moment they step up. And I would say even the 2% that think they don't have it, they found convenient ways to hide the fear.
Suppress it.
Posturing, you know, the strategies we have so we don't actually have to feel what's happening. And I would say the integration of it is not feeling the fear. The integration of it is just accepting the experience you're having and you're not labeling it as fear anymore. Like there's no program that's doing that labeling for you. It's just like you're just alive and you're present and experience is happening. There's intensified experience is basically how I would language it. I suggest getting on stage, and if you do want to experience what that heightened sensation, and you don't even have to get on stage, you can even imagine this. In your mind's eye, notice what happens when you get on stage and then just breathe. Breathe through and let those intense things dissolve inside you because that's where all the freedom is. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard to do that when there's an idea about pressure, expectation, you delivering good content, impressing people, being loved. Like the stage really brings up all the shit it needs to bring up in your life. For me, it's a bit like magnifying glass for what's happening in other areas of our life. And sometimes I think to myself, I think life just directed me to teach people public speaking so I could help them change their relationship to fear.
I love that, bro. I love it. Love all of that so much. So I've got some nuanced follow-up questions that I think will be supportive, at least for me.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
Firstly, I see every fear ultimately is the fear of death. And I see meditation as learning to let go of life as we know it, the material world, our shape, etc. And so it's practicing a flavor of fear. Therefore, it requires a flavor of courage. When you say the study with Tibetan monks, because Tibetan monks practice there's different types of meditation. Tibetan monks practice some sort of witnessing technique, observation technique. Is that correct? What sort of meditation do you?
The Tibetan schools are not my area of expertise. But if anyone wants to look up the study, it's in my book, so you can just find where the reference is. As for me, my meditation path has primarily been tantric, and tantra has like thousands of different techniques. And you know, when I first started meditating, it was just breath awareness. And since then, it's changed to include everything. I've stopped being snobby about the types of meditations I employ. So everything from energetic practices that clarify the energetic body, the energetic body being like the mind and emotions, to more presence-based practices, which are just about deepening into that space we've talked about, like embracing everything as it is and not trying to change it. So it's working on all levels, and self-inquiry as well. Like for me, the big game changer when I came across Tantra, it is the first path I entered, but then I explored lots of different things. And there was always this internal thing around what's better, what's the one I should focus on. And Tantra, they have this map where it's like they put all the different forms of practice in, I wouldn't call it a sequence, let's say a model. And you have Shambhava Paya, which is, it's like basically if you can be in presence, just be in presence. Don't worry about doing meditation technique. Don't worry about anything else. Just be in presence if it's accessible to you. The next one down is Shaktapaya, which is basically self-inquiry. And it can be any form of self-inquiry, but it's where you're using the mind to unwind the mind, basically, to inquire into the truth of your nature. And then the third category is everything else. So the tantra, the yoga, the breathwork, the pranayama, teaching, acts of service, acts of devotion, everything fits into that third path. And it's basically like, if you can't be in these other two, then do everything you can in that. Like, it's basically anything that comes through action that's going to support you to mitigate. And ideally, like, sometimes people get lost in this. They're like, oh, so this is the highest path, I should just do this. And it's like, no, realize that when you're in that presence, usually involves coming back to service anyway. Like, these things are cyclical in nature. So for me, that map has really kind of supported me to not be too attached to the practice, but just like find the practice that's going to work for a moment, for that given moment. And I also want to chime in that you said something great. I had to write this down when you said it. Every fear is the fear of death. I would largely agree with you. I haven't really examined that deeply, but I did have this insight at one point that every desire is the desire for God. Every desire is the desire for God. And sometimes we have to go through all those other desires to find that the desire at the end of the tunnel is the one for God. And God here, I mean like universe, our essence, nature, the truth of who we are, not the guy with the white beard. If you find him, you're probably going to find there's more desire after that. And I think these two work really well together. Like, even after doing meta fear, I'm like, I could have called this meta desire, because the fear comes up proportionally to how much desire we have moving towards something. And I think this idea of the fear of death is essentially like when we step towards that meeting with our essence nature, it is one of death. Like, the identity we've accustomed ourselves to be in to protect ourselves from how intense life can be, that part has to fall away to embrace totality as it is. It has to die.
Love that, dude. Love that. I love the symbiotic nature of those two perspectives and ideas that kind of melded together, the desire for God and fear of death.
It's beautiful.
And I also, I find it interesting that the model of those areas of practice to lead to totality, which then leads back to material service, and the undulating between the manifest and the unmanifest, just that cyclical nature that we have. But I find that grouping strange. And the reason I asked the question around the type of meditation is not necessarily to say which one's better, but to understand the function of different types. Because I've practiced a fair different types of meditation, and I perceive that there's more range in between just embodied presence with no effort, or mindfulness with no effort, and self-inquiry. My perspective, just on my experience, just my opinion, is that there's like a range of meditation styles that bridge between self-inquiry and presence. And I'm curious, because you use it as a training tool for courage and how to create space between the sensations that arise when someone's in fight or flight and the story that they attach to it, that gets pulled. Because I largely practiced Vedic meditation. Vedic meditation was the thing that I did twice a day. And that's a transcendence meditation where the mantra kind of shoots you straight to oneness, but it's not an awareness in oneness, because it's one. So there's no perspectives that the human brain can hold in that space. It's gone. So it's like mantra, 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 resistance comes up, mantra, 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 resistance, stress gets processed, blah, blah, blah. And then you get to a point where zoom, and you shoot to a point that you don't even know you're there. And then you come out of it and you're like, where was I? I wasn't awake. I wasn't asleep. Oh, I was bathing in oneness. And that, from my perspective and experience, it trained me to bypass some of the thinner layers. And so it was supportive, because it familiarized myself with more of totality. However, it meant that I was able to transcend my ego, but not necessarily integrate it. Whereas like then more of my understanding of a lot of Buddhist meditation and my understanding of Tibetan meditation is that it's not so much transcendence straight into totality. It's more being able to sit in awareness in the human mind, using things like observing the breath, observing different parts of it. They're more observation based, and observing emotions, etc. And that feels like quite integrative chunk on the range of spectrum of different sorts of meditation. And I perceived that specifically as a tool would have more of an impact on expanding the time between sensations coming up with a fear and labeling it a story, more so than just bathing in totality. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I'd say you could be onto something there.
Yeah, but then on the same token, everything's required. So
it is, and it's like I've had times I've got really stuck. Like that's that journey up that you're speaking about, and then there's also a journey back down. It's like, great, you've come to consciousness. Now, can you bring consciousness back through the body? Like, can you land that here in your body, in Earth? When you look at a lot of the earlier spiritual paths, it was very much like when you look at Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, the pathway was just like all of this. I'm very, very strongly paraphrasing here. All of this is an illusion. Get the fuck out of here. Come back to yourself. And don't even engage in any of this stuff. It was very much renunciation based, which is funny to me that this is still why most yoga teachers are taught. It's a text they choose to study. Whereas then there's this other pathway, which is like, great, if you can come back to that, can you bring that through the body? Can you dwell in that and recognize that the same essence nature you've been chasing up there is around you in every moment? And I mean, words here kind of start falling apart, but instead of these being a veil between, I mean, it's kind of like silence here is all I could really offer. Not even worth finishing the sentence.
I appreciate that so much. It's true though. Love this, man. Love this chat. And I love your wisdom because I love myself and I love my own wisdom, and your wisdom similar to my wisdom. The meditation's like the main thing I prescribe for courage as well. It's the primary thing, the first thing. And then I have my own practice called the Heart's Prayer that's like an integrated tool, but meditation. So I love that.
And also, I feel this is a theme in a few things we've spoken about. I think there's something in letting go of attachment. For me, when the goal becomes not the desire, like the thing you were saying, people want to break through so they can have the thing they want that's on the other side of the fear. It's like when you learn to let go of that, and that happens very subtly. It's like there's usually a conditioned attachment that's been unexamined, and the moment that we can examine that attachment and just let it go, it just frees up the experience to be one of whatever it is. If you're asking someone on a date, there's an attachment to them saying yes. And it might not be it might be a strong attachment, it might not be. But it's like if we can let go of that and just be like, hey, I'm just going to smile at this person, say hi, and then see what happens there. It just frees up so much more energy and presence for anything that shows up without the attachment.
Yeah, dude, I agree wholeheartedly. The whole model through which I view the world is that, and it's a limited model, but it's been most supportive for me, is that we can be in our heart or we can be in our head. Our head is survival brain and our heart is the way that totality feeds through our brain or head or life or body or whatever. And that with every single pursuit, action or situation or relationship, there are head attachments involved in that situation. And there are also heart desires. And this is one where I have to let go of the intellectual frameworks and come back to my present moment experience for it to make sense. Because it contradicts some models out there that I value. But if, let's say the dating one, asking this girl out on a date, I've got head attachments there, which are, I want her to think that I'm attractive. I want her to say yes. I don't want to get rejected. I'm attached to having sex. Just all these head attachments, fear attachments, like my animal, more human relative self that wants certain things. And there's a fear attached to not getting it. And then on the other end of the spectrum, in the exact same situation, I have the other aspect of my consciousness that I call the heart that desires to have a connection experience, have an experience period of something, that desires to be of service in that scenario in the way that I show up in my consciousness. And these desires that are more aligned with my true nature in this model, I know it's got limits. If I can feed that orientation, it supports the dissolution of fear in that scenario, because I'm feeding the part of my consciousness that is more unity based. And then the fear kind of dissolves a bit, and it becomes easier to go up to her if my intention is to connect, if my intention is to have an experience, if my connection is to be of service, then a lot of the fear dissolves. And I feel like it's similar to what you're saying, because the attachment needs to be surrendered to be able to activate those other aspects of my consciousness. But I perceive that both of those aspects of consciousness are present in the exact same situation. And it's not like I am a person that has one consciousness. It's like I have compartmentalized these two aspects of my brain, like the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex are coexisting, and one has dominance based on my awareness's ability to reorient which one I feed. So thanks for bringing that back up, because that concept's probably the framework that's dearest to my heart, my own personal work. Say some words, bro.
I had a story come to mind as you were sharing this. I remembered this was years ago. I was running into Chadstone, and this was like, I don't know, 10 minutes before it was closing. For anyone that's not in Melbourne, Chadstone's like a very big shopping center, maybe the biggest shopping center in Melbourne. And on the way out, there was like my favorite pizza shop. And I was running past, and I was like, oh, I'll grab a pizza on the way out. And I stopped to get my pizza, and I'm looking at my pizza. I'm not looking at my pizza. I'm looking at all the pizzas available in front of me. And I look up, and one of the women that's serving someone else has the most beautiful arm. I was just taken by her arm. I was like, whoa, I'm feeling like, it's like, you know, all this stuff started moving through me. I'm like, I'm really attracted to her arm. And this was weird. For one, I've never been attracted to someone's arm. I've never like given someone a compliment being like, you have a very beautiful arm. And in this case, I'm like, this is really strong. And she was serving someone like 2 or 3 meters away from me. And when it came up, I was like, fuck, I have to tell her. You know, it grew, and it wasn't just her arm. I was like, she's really beautiful. But it definitely started with the arm. And this is like end of day rush. All the people are leaving and closing. I'm standing there. There's like 5, 10 people standing around me who have either ordered and waiting for their food, or other people. And there's some other lady that's serving me. I'm like, this is really awkward. Like, how do I express this to someone that's a few meters from me and all of these other people standing around? And you can't really have a strategy for this kind of stuff. And I was just breathing and feeling, and like my heartbeat's racing. I'm kind of like, oh, fuck. And the woman that's serving me is giving me my thing, and the other lady comes down to like put something through the till. And I stopped, and I was like, I just have to tell you that you're absolutely beautiful. Now, as I said this, it was like I took a plate and dropped it on the floor. Everyone around us just stopped and started looking at me. It was like absolute tension out of nowhere. And even as I was going through the process, I'm like, I have a girlfriend, not looking to date someone else. You know, there was no actual desire for this to go anywhere. So even the part of me was questioning, like, why the fuck am I saying this? And I can't even tell you the exact words I said. I just remember I had to like express what was there. And I expressed it to her, and I took my pizza, and I took like maybe 15 steps. I got to the escalator, and I couldn't feel half my body. It was just absolute bliss running through me. And I was like, I have no idea what that thing was about, but whatever I've just opened up inside myself, it's like, it's priceless. Like, and I just stood there, like not even eating the pizza, just standing in bliss by this escalator in the middle of, you know, Chadstone. It's like you would not expect to have a spiritual experience in Chadstone. And that for me is really the power of when we start exploring these minute moments and leaning into them, and the letting go of the attachment. You know, both like there's so much different attachment there. Like first the layer of, you know, I'm male, she's female, I'm attracted to her. Do I want us to go anywhere? Do I want to ask for her number? It's like, no, none of that's real. And then there's the second layer of attachment. What's her staff members going to think? What are these people around me going to think? Are they going to think I'm weird? Are they going to think I'm hitting on her? And just being like, no, none of that. Like, we're just like continual coding and programming. I'm watching inside my own mind being like, this is all data, but to this moment, it's not actually real. It's just the stuff that I'm afraid of.
Such a beautiful story. Thanks for following the breadcrumbs in your life. And in this episode, I feel like that has been a theme that's naturally emerged in this whole interview, has been that your innate pull towards feeling present, alive, unique experiences naturally creates a lot of leadership, power, growth, service, purpose, success. And what an embodied leader you are within that. Thank you for being that. Thank you for sharing your wisdom on this interview. I would love to give you the chance to talk about how people who have really connected with you in this interview can find you and work with you and that in a moment. But yeah, I just wanted to honor the beauty of this chat, man, because I'm going to have to jump straight off this after and not get a chance to continue to drop in. But I like these little timestamp catch-ups that we have. So thank you. Thank you
for having me, bro. It's been good. And also just want to acknowledge you, like the place you're meeting these conversations from. It's like I can feel your authenticity and how we're just not going along with the typical podcast. And there's just such a freshness in that, how deeply welcomed I feel into the space between us for the conversation to open where it needs to.
Thank you, Miroslav. Thank you. I would love for you to give the audience, thank you, audience, listeners, thank you so much for being here. Where can they find out more about you, brother? What would you like to spruik?
Best and easiest place to just connect with me on Facebook. Say hi. Sometimes if people add me and I don't know where they're coming from, they end up not becoming my Facebook friends. I'm quite open to adding, but I just like a bit of an introduction. Like, hey, listen to Ryan's podcast. I would love to connect. Awesome. Great. I do have a website, miroslavp.com. I have my Enlivened Speaking Institute website as well. There's videos of my work you can check out on YouTube. But, if you feel a call, the main thing is like just reach out and say hi.
Yeah. And I'd really love to second the work that you do, because I know people who have done your work and it's very similar to mine. And I trust that the people that are meant to come and do my workshop will do that. And people that feel called to you will do your workshop, and they'll probably do both. So if you feel a call,
I know some that have done both.
Yeah. I know that the work that Miroslav does in his workshops around speaking and sales, he has different workshops where he actually facilitates the experience of increasing that gap between activation of fear and attachment to the story of it, and then allows for people who want to share their message to the world or grow themselves to be able to practice being in that presence and authenticity and activate their real authentic power in the world in a really beautiful way that only the experience of a workshop with a really embodied facilitator can create. And I've heard amazing things about it. So if you are looking to improve in that way, check out Miroslav's website and you'll find out more about that. And brother, thank you so much for jumping on, bro. Thank you, listeners, and we'll chat soon.
Thank you. Take care.
Lots of love. See ya.